At the Christmas Eve dinner, I thanked my grandmother for the $500 check. She stopped carving the turkey set. The knife down carefully looked me straight in the eye and said, "The gift I wired you was $1 million." When my grandmother said those words, the entire dining room went dead silent. The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree kept blinking, but everything else seemed to freeze. My name is Hazel Rivera. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant in Fargo, North Dakota. My job is to follow numbers that people try very hard to hide. That night in Knoxville, Tennessee, at our family home, I had just opened the white envelope my mother handed me across the table. Inside was a check for $500. I stood up and thanked my grandmother out loud, making sure everyone heard. She was at the head of the table carving the turkey like she always did every Christmas Eve. But the moment I said thank you for the $500, her face changed. She put the carving knife down with a soft clink, looked directly at me, and asked in a calm but shaking voice, "The gift I wired you was $1 million. Where did it go?" Why, the room went completely still. No one touched their food. No one spoke. I could hear the fire crackling in the fireplace, but that was it. That single question turned our family Christmas dinner into something none of us would ever forget. If you've ever had a holiday dinner that went completely wrong, one that changed everything, drop a comment below and tell me about it. Where were you? What happened? Share your story. And if family drama during the holidays hits close to home, hit that like button. Let's see how many of us have been there. Ditch. The phone rang while I was deep in a spreadsheet cross-referencing discrepancies in a corporate expense report. It was late evening, and the wind howled outside my apartment window in Fargo, rattling the glass as another wave of snow piled up against the building. I glanced at the caller ID and saw my brother's name. Beckett sounded upbeat from the start, launching into small talk about the cold snap hitting Tennessee too. He asked how the winter was treating me up north, joking that I must be used to it by now. Then he shifted gears. He suggested that maybe this year I could skip coming home for Christmas. Grandma Florence had been feeling tired lately, he said, and the doctor recommended keeping things low-key to avoid any unnecessary stress on her heart. Too many people, too much excitement. It might not be the best idea. He added that flights from Fargo to Knoxville were running pretty expensive around the holidays, especially last minute. My job kept me busy anyway, right? No need to spend all that money and time traveling when things were quiet down there. Something about his tone felt off, too polished, like he was reading from a script. Then he slipped. "Mom said that, the doctor thinks Grandma needs absolute rest." He corrected himself quickly, but it was too late. I'd caught it. I pressed him on that. Why would Mom be the one talking about the doctor's advice? He laughed it off, saying he just meant the family had discussed it with the doctor together. He changed the subject to some local news back home, then wrapped up the call faster than usual, promising to catch up soon. After hanging up, I sat there, staring at my screens. The numbers from work blurred together. Beckett had never been the type to worry about my travel costs. He'd borrowed money from me before without much thought. And Grandma Florence always lit up at the idea of having everyone together for the holidays. She thrived on it, telling the same old stories year after year. The unease gnawed at me all evening. I tried to push it aside and finish my analysis, but I couldn't focus. Finally, around midnight, I gave in and opened my banking app on my phone. There was this joint account Grandma had set up for me back when I started college, a trust fund kind of thing, seeded with some savings she'd put aside over the years. She'd told me it was for emergencies or big life steps like a down payment on a house someday. I rarely checked it. The balance had sat steady for ages, but that night I logged in anyway. The recent transactions loaded and my heart stopped. There it was, an incoming wire transfer for $1 million. The memo read, "For my dear Hazel, with all my love, Grandma Florence." The date was just a couple of weeks earlier. I scrolled down. The very next day, an outgoing transfer for $999,800. Destination, an external account I didn't recognize. The remaining balance was just a couple thousand, enough to keep it from hitting zero and triggering alerts. My hands went cold. I set the phone down and stood up, pacing the small living room. This couldn't be a glitch. Wires that size required verification, and the joint nature meant someone with access had initiated it. But I hadn't touched the account in years. Grandma would have told me directly if she'd sent something that massive. She'd always been straightforward about her gifts. Who else had access? The account was joint with her, but she'd mentioned once that Mom helped manage some of her finances as she got older just for convenience. Power of attorney stuff, maybe for bills and such. Common in families when someone hits their 80 seconds. I poured myself a fresh coffee, though it was late, and sat back down. The apartment felt quieter than usual, the snow muffling everything outside. I replayed Beckett's call in my head, the hesitation when he mentioned Mom, the push to keep me away this year. By morning, the suspicion had hardened into something sharper. I called the bank first thing, verifying the transactions over the phone with security questions. The representative confirmed the outgoing wire had been authorized properly from an IP address in the Knoxville area that sealed it. Someone close had done this, and they didn't want me home for Christmas because they were afraid I'd find out. I spent the next days turning it over in my mind during commutes and lunch breaks. Work demanded focus. A major client was relying on my report to uncover embezzlement worth millions. But my thoughts kept drifting south. The distance from Fargo to Knoxville felt farther than ever, over 1,000 miles of interstate and bad weather. Beckett texted a couple times after the call, casual stuff about holiday plans without me. I responded neutrally, buying time. No confrontations, yet not over the phone. The more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. Grandma's gift had been intercepted before it ever reached me fully, and the person behind it knew exactly how to make it look legitimate. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone outright, but I knew I had to go home. Skipping Christmas wasn't an option anymore. I started digging carefully, keeping everything personal so I wouldn't cross any ethical lines at work. At first my mind went to the worst possibilities for Beckett. He'd always been impulsive with money, so I figured maybe gambling debts or a bad investment eating up cash fast. I searched public records and old transaction patterns I remembered from when we'd shared some family expenses years back. Nothing obvious showed up on his end right away. No unusual withdrawals or red flags that screamed addiction or loss. It took patience, late nights scrolling through free online databases and cross-checking what little I could access without logging into professional tools. Eventually, the trail led somewhere I hadn't expected. The bulk of the outgoing wire had landed in an account registered to Drake Ingram, Beckett's longtime boyfriend. They'd been together for years, living openly in Knoxville, where attitudes had shifted enough for it to feel normal. Once I had that name, pieces fell into place quicker. Business class round-trip tickets to Rome booked almost immediately after the transfer cleared. Then connections to Venice hotel reservations at a 5-star property right on the Grand Canal, the kind with private gondola service and views people post about for likes. A big deposit went to a luxury resort in the Smoky Mountains, the type of venue that hosts high-end weddings with mountain vistas and custom menus. The amount matched what they'd need to lock in dates and vendors for something elaborate. Then there was the purchase at an authorized Rolex dealer in Atlanta, a men's Datejust or something similar judging by the price tag. Classic, flashy enough to turn heads without being over the top. Their social media feeds confirmed it all. Photos started popping up, the two of them on a bridge in Rome at sunset, arms around each other with the Colosseum in the background. Captions like "new chapters" or "dreams coming true." Venice shots followed gondola rides, glasses of Prosecco, smiles that looked genuinely happy. Engagement hints woven in, nothing explicit but clear to anyone paying attention. Scrolling through those posts hit hard. They looked so carefree, like the world had handed them everything on a platter. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my apartment, piecing together how my grandmother's generous gift had funded their romance. What stung more were the smaller transfers I spotted from Mom's account to Drake, scattered over the previous months. Modest amounts with vague memos like family help or miscellaneous support. Nothing huge on its own, but the pattern suggested she'd been smoothing the way for whatever plan they had. Teresa Rivera. My mother had always prioritized Beckett's happiness, especially after he came out and faced some rough patches early on. She'd bend over backward to shield him from judgment or hardship. Nights became sleepless. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hoping this was all a coincidence, that maybe Grandma had intended some of it for them too, and just routed it oddly. But the timing didn't lie. The money moved out before I even knew it existed. Doubt crept in waves. Part of me wanted to call Beckett, demand answers, hear him explain it away as a loan or misunderstanding. But another part, the analytical side trained to spot fraud, knew confrontation now would only give them time to cover tracks. I kept gathering screenshots quietly. Every post, every visible receipt fragment in stories, every like and comment that built the timeline. It painted a coordinated effort, not a solo act of desperation. Mom's involvement hurt deepest. She'd raised us to value honesty, or so I'd thought. Seeing those supporting transfers felt like confirmation she knew enough to enable it. By the time I closed my laptop each evening, exhaustion mixed with anger. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with questions I couldn't voice yet. Direct showdowns over texts or calls risked denials I'd never prove. They held the home advantage in Knoxville. I needed to see their faces, watch reactions in person. Silence became my strategy. Respond to family messages with neutral updates about work being busy, nothing more. Let them think I might still stay away. Inside resolve built steadily. This wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal layered on top, using Grandma's trust, her love for me, to fuel their lifestyle upgrade without a second thought. The evidence folder on my desktop grew thicker, printed pages stacked neatly for backup. I wasn't rushing to judgment anymore. Clarity emerged from the chaos. Whatever their reasons, they'd chosen secrecy over family, and that choice had consequences I intended to make real. Facing them directly was the only path left. Doubt consumed me completely in the days that followed. I'd lie in bed for hours, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, replaying every possible scenario. What if I had it all wrong? What if this was some elaborate misunderstanding, and confronting them would shatter whatever fragile bonds we had left forever? Memories flooded back, uninvited Christmas mornings from when we were kids in that same Knoxville house. Grandma Florence, sitting by the fireplace in her rocking chair, voice soft as she shared stories from her younger years about raising my mom during tough times or holiday traditions she'd carried from her own childhood. Beckett, older and always protective, stepping in when bullies at school targeted me for being the quiet one with my nose in books. He'd stand up for me without hesitation, earning detentions but never complaining. Those images clashed violently with what I'd uncovered. How could the brother who'd shielded me back then orchestrate something like this? And Mom, always the peacemaker, the one who sacrificed for us. How deep did her role go? I picked up the phone more than once, thumb hovering over her contact. A direct question might force the truth out or at least give me some denial to cling to, but each time fear stopped me. They'd had weeks to align stories. One call could tip them off. Let them prepare lies I'd never unravel. Sleep came in fits, dreams mixing old laughter with current betrayal. I'd wake up tangled in sheets, heart racing, convinced for a moment it was all a nightmare. Then reality settled back in, heavy and undeniable. Part of me wanted to back out, pretend ignorance, preserve the illusion of family for Grandma's sake. She deserved peaceful holidays at her age, not chaos. But ignoring it felt like cowardice, like letting them win. The internal battle raged on during quiet moments at work, staring at reports without seeing them. Colleagues noticed my distraction, asking if everything was okay. I brushed it off with excuses about holiday stress. Eventually resolve hardened. Running away solved nothing. I confirmed my flight to Knoxville, the original one I'd booked months earlier. No changes, no signals that anything was amiss. Preparation became my anchor. I organized the digital files into a clean folder structure. Screenshots, time-stamped links, bookmarked everything duplicated on a small USB drive tucked in my carry-on. For backup, I printed key pages at a local shop, binding them loosely in a plain manila. No labels, nothing obvious. I jotted notes on paper, 2 specific questions phrased neutrally, points to raise in order. Reminders to myself scrolled in margins. Stay calm. Listen to responses. Watch. Body language. My training kicked in. Evidence only mattered if presented without emotion clouding it. Packing felt mechanical. Warm clothes for Tennessee's milder winter, gifts I'd already bought to maintain normally. The envelope of printouts went at the bottom of my suitcase, weighted down so it wouldn't shift. At the airport in Fargo, check-in lines moved slowly. Security patted down bags. Announcements echoed overhead. Boarding the plane, I chose a window seat, buckling in as engines revved. Takeoff pushed me back, the city lights shrinking below through patches of cloud. Hours stretched ahead, connection in Minneapolis, probably then southbound. I stared at endless white expanses drifting by, mind wandering to what waited on the ground. This wasn't just a holiday visit anymore. It felt like heading into hostile territory, where the enemies shared my blood. Strategy mattered. Observe first, speak last. Turbulence jolted the cabin, occasionally mirroring my thoughts. Flight attendants offered drinks. I declined nursing water instead. No distractions from movies or music, just planning sequences, anticipating deflections. As descent began, seatbelt signs dinged on. Knoxville's runway lights appeared through breaks and clouds, familiar even after years away. Wheels touched down smoothly. I gathered my bag, moved with the crowd through the terminal. Rental car counter was quick compact SUV for the short drive home. The highway south felt unchanged, billboards and exits I'd known since childhood. Holiday traffic thickened near town radios playing carols in passing cars. Pulling into the neighborhood, strings of lights outlined roofs and yards. Our family home stood at the end of the cul-de-sac porch, glowing warmly, wreaths on doors. For a long moment I sat gripping the wheel, breathing deep. The weight in my chest pressed harder, seeing it all so festive, so innocent from outside. Grabbing bags, I walked the familiar path to the front door. It opened before I knocked, smiles and hugs, waiting voices overlapping with welcomes. I forced my own smile, returned embraces lightly. "Good to be here," I said, stepping inside like nothing had changed. Everything had. The Christmas Eve dinner unfolded with all the surface warmth our family could muster. Conversation flowed in fits and starts, safe topics like recent snowfalls back in Fargo, how work projects were wrapping up for the year, or reminiscing about past holidays when everything felt simpler. Laughter came, but it rang a little, forced, dying quickly into awkward pauses filled with the clink of silverware. Dad sat at his usual spot near the end of the table, nodding occasionally when spoken to directly. He contributed little else, focusing on his plate as if the food required his full attention. That quiet presence had always been his way, especially during gatherings. Everyone settled in, eventually plates piled high with roasted turkey stuffing and cranberry sauce. Grandma Florence took her place at the head, carving portions with steady hands despite her age. Mom waited until the serving dishes had made their rounds and people were eating before she reached for something beside her chair. She produced a plain white envelope, sliding it across the tablecloth toward me with a soft smile. Her voice carried that gentle tone she used for special moments. "This is from Grandma. She wanted to keep things modest this year, just a little something." I took it, fingers brushing the crisp paper. Inside was a check for $500 written in Grandma's familiar script, though shakier now. I made sure my thanks was loud enough for the whole table. "Thank you so much, Grandma. This means a lot." I looked right at her, ensuring the words carried. She paused mid-slice, the carving fork covering. Then she set the utensils down carefully, the metal ringing lightly against the platter. Her gaze lifted to mine, expression shifting from fond to troubled in an instant. The question came out, measured, laced with confusion and hurt. "The gift I wired you was $1 million. Where did it go? Why?" Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Breathing seemed to halt collectively. No one chewed. No one moved. Mom recovered first, her chair scraping as she leaned forward. Her pitch rose slightly, words tumbling out in reassurance. "Mom, you must be mixing things up. The doctor mentioned memory can get fuzzy with the new medication. It's probably just a slip." My brother went pale, color draining from his face. He set his glass down, harder than intended, wine sloshing near the rim. "Hazel, are you sure about what you saw on that check?" His question stuttered, eyes darting between me and Grandma. His boyfriend forced a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes, glancing around the table for support. "Sounds like a simple bank error. Happens all the time with big transfers. We can sort it out tomorrow." "No big deal." I said nothing yet. Instead I watched. Mom's gaze dropped to her napkin, fingers twisting the fabric tightly. She avoided looking directly at anyone, especially Grandma. Beckett gripped his wine stem so hard his knuckles whitened, staring at his plate as if answers might appear in the gravy. Drake checked his watch, subtly shifting in his seat like the chair had grown uncomfortable. His smile stayed plastered, but it strained at the edges. The fireplace crackled in the background, the only sound breaking the heaviness. Lights on the tree twinkled on, oblivious. Grandma held my eyes longest, searching for something. Confirmation perhaps, or denial. Her hands rested flat on the table, now steady despite the tremor in her voice earlier. Dad cleared his throat once but said nothing. Fork paused midair. Tension thickened with every passing second. The delicious smells turned cloying. Appetites vanished. I noted every micro-expression, the way Mom's foot tapped nervously under the table, Beckett swallowing hard repeatedly, Drake's leg bouncing. Their attempts at deflection hung in the air, thin and unconvincing. The holiday facade cracked wide open, revealing what lay beneath. No one reached for seconds. I stayed quiet just long enough for the weight of Grandma's question to sink in fully. Then I reached for my phone, standing slowly so no one could miss the movement. The living room TV was already on standby, modern setup with wireless casting. A few taps and the screen lit up with the first image, a clear screenshot of the bank statement showing the $1 million wire from Grandma's account into the joint one we'd shared. I didn't raise my voice. Calm delivery mattered more than volume. "This is the incoming transfer," memo says. "It's for me, with love from Grandma." Next slide. The outgoing wire. The following day, nearly the full amount routed elsewhere. That's where it went immediately after. The room's tension ratcheted higher. Breathing grew shallow around the table. I advanced again. Flight confirmations in business class names matching Beckett and his boyfriend destinations, Rome, then Venice. These tickets were purchased right as the money cleared. Hotel bookings followed, luxury suites with canal views, dates overlapping perfectly, then reservations at places that cost thousands per night. Social media captures came up, photos they'd posted publicly, timestamps, visible locations tagged in Italy. Public posts celebrating the trip, all funded within days of the transfer. The final big one, the wedding venue contract in the Smokies, substantial deposit deducted. And this hold on a high-end resort for the ceremony, non-refundable advance paid from the same source. I laid it out methodically, tracing the flow step by step, without accusation in my tone, just facts. The money originated with Grandma, intended for me, diverted almost entirely to his boyfriend's account, spent on travel and future plans. My brother shifted uncomfortably, face flushed now instead of pale. He leaned forward, hands open in plea. "It's not what it looks like. We only borrowed it temporarily for the wedding expenses. I swear we planned to pay it back once things stabilized. It was supposed to be a short-term thing." His boyfriend's chair scraped back abruptly, cheeks burning red. He pushed to his feet, voice sharp. "I'm not sitting here for this kind of family mess." He grabbed his coat from the nearby rack, storming toward the door. The slam echoed through the house like a gunshot, cutting off any response. Mom's composure cracked first with denial. She shook her head vigorously, eyes wide. "There must be some mistake. I had no idea about any large transfer like that." But as the images lingered on screen, her shoulders slumped, voice dropping, she admitted quietly. I helped move some things around. Beckett was stressed about making everything perfect for their future. I didn't want him to lose that chance." Grandma absorbed every word without interruption, fingers clenched around her napkin until the fabric bunched. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, but her expression hardened beneath the grief. She drew a steadying breath, gazed steady on the frozen display. Her words came soft yet unbreakable. "If I stay silent tonight, I'd spend whatever years I have left knowing I allowed deception to win. I won't carry that regret." She reached for her phone on the table, dialing without hesitation. "Yes, this is Florence Rivera. I need to report financial fraud and theft involving family members." The call connected, her voice clear, as she provided the address and brief details. No one interrupted her. The line stayed open while she spoke to the dispatcher, confirming officers would arrive soon. Plates sat untouched, food cooling rapidly. The festive lights continued blinking, mocking the wreckage. Beckett buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Mom stared at the tablecloth, tears falling freely now. Dad remained statue, still, eyes on Grandma with something like quiet respect. I powered down the connection screen, going dark. The truth hung heavy, undeniable. Grandma ended the call, setting the phone down gently. She looked at me, then noted almost imperceptible gratitude mixed with sorrow. Consequences had begun. Officers arrived sooner than anyone expected. Their knock firm against the front door. 2 local Knoxville patrol cops stepped inside, uniforms crisp under the porch light, expressions professional but alert to the charged atmosphere. The dining room remained untouched, plates. Congealed candles burned, low tree lights still flashing in mechanical cheer. Grandma greeted them at the entry, voice steady, despite everything. I joined her, handing over the printed folder and USB without delay. We led the pair to the table, clearing a space among the abandoned dishes. They listened carefully as Grandma explained to the intended gift her trust in family management of finances and the discovery. Tonight I added context on the joint account setup, how access worked, and the rapid diversion I'd traced. The officers flipped through pages, scanning transaction records and supporting documents on a laptop they connected to the drive. Questions came measured, confirming dates, amounts, relationships. They noted voluntary statements. No arrests yet, since investigation needed formal review. Everyone provided initial accounts right there. Mom spoke haltingly, eyes downcast, repeating her role in facilitating transfers for Beckett's benefit. My brother sat slumped, admitting knowledge but framing it as temporary need. Dad offered little, confirming he had no involvement in financial matters. The process dragged in, suffocating quiet notebooks filled photos taken of key evidence copies. One officer radio dispatch for case logging, the static crackle cutting through our silence. By the time they wrapped up preliminaries, promising follow-up from detectives, exhaustion blanketed the house. They advised preserving all digital trails, left contact cards, and departed into the cold night. Word traveled fast in a place like Knoxville. Small city networks amplified everything. My brother's employer, a regional construction firm he'd worked at for years, let him go shortly after. Official reasons cited performance, but whispers pointed to reputation damage from circulating details. Former co-workers crossed streets to avoid greetings. Lunch invitations dried up. Mom, standing in the church community she'd devoted decades to, crumbled quietly but completely. The volunteer coordinator called, personally expressing regret while removing her from rosters for events and committees. Longtime friends who'd shared potlucks and prayer groups grew distant. Polite nods at grocery stores replaced warm conversations. Invitations stopped coming. His boyfriend's final message arrived as a single text, a clean break. No explanations, followed by radio silence. Calls went unanswered. Profile updates vanished from mutual views. The backlash reached me too, though farther away. Distant cousins phoned with lectures on forgiveness and family unity, accusing rigidity for involving authorities. A few childhood acquaintances from Knoxville neighborhoods unfollowed, then blocked entirely online, signaling unwillingness to associate with the fallout. Isolation settled differently for each of us. Grandma withdrew into quiet reflection, processing betrayal from those closest. Dad maintained his reserve, helping with practicalities but offering no opinions. I returned to Fargo numb routines, resuming on autopilot. Work demands pulled focus, but evenings brought waves of second-guessing. Had justice outweighed the permanent fractures? Community judgment proved relentless in tight circles. Beckett struggled finding new employment locally, skills solid but references tainted. Mom filled days with solitary errands, avoiding familiar haunts where glances lingered too long. Even neutral parties felt ripples. Aunt and uncles split on sides. Holiday cards thinned out. Personal costs mounted invisibly. Sleep fractured, appetite wavered. Messages from old connections carried undertones of blame, as if exposing truth made me the villain. The price of transparency revealed itself gradually. Relationships severed beyond repair. Reputations altered permanently, daily lives reshaped by one night's revelations. Support came unexpectedly from Grandma's occasional calls. Short check-ins affirming her choice, easing some isolation. But the wider family web frayed irreparably, threads cut clean. The federal courtroom in Tennessee carried a weight all its own, sterile fluorescent lights, wooden benches polished from years of use, the low hum of anticipation before proceedings began. I sat in the gallery with Grandma beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine for reassurance. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically, wire fraud charges, stemming from the interstate transfer forgery elements, in access manipulation, conspiracy between family members. Evidence packets mirrored what I'd compiled, now official exhibits. Mom and my brother entered pleas that avoided full trial. Sentences reflected first offense considerations and cooperation, probation terms stretching years. Mandatory community service hours logged weekly, strict supervision with regular check-ins and financial monitoring. Full restitution topped the order's $1 million, principal plus compounded interest and penalties repaid through structured payments deducted automatically. The judge's gavel fell with finality. No incarceration, but restrictions that reshaped daily lives. Curfews, travel approvals, prohibited financial roles. Letters arrived afterward. Handwritten apologies from Mom. Emails forwarded through lawyers from Beckett. Pleas for understanding, promises of change. Requests for dialogue. I read none fully. Responses stayed non-existent. Phone numbers blocked. Emails filtered to trash, social accounts removed from follows and groups. Complete severance, no exceptions. Grandma healed slowly. At first, grief surfacing in quiet moments, but resilience won out. She worked with bank specialists to create a new account, layered security, two-factor everything, access limited strictly to us too. The transfer came without fanfare. $1 million exactly memo, simple and heartfelt. A separate envelope arrived by mail, her handwriting on thick stationery. In it she wrote that this was the gift she'd always meant for me, free from interference or misunderstanding. No conditions, just love and pride in my integrity. I used it practically. A modest house in a quiet Fargo neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, craftsman style with a porch overlooking a small park. Closing felt surreal, keys heavy in hand. One room stayed purposefully empty at first, then furnished simply guest bed, soft lighting, space for her suitcase, when visits aligned with flights south from Knoxville. She came twice that first year, stays growing longer. Evenings on the couch, sharing tea, talking about books or garden plans, avoiding old wounds. Reflection settled over time. Materially, life improved, a home owned, outright stability earned. But victory never felt triumphant, more like survival. I didn't gain some moral high ground. I simply refused to let deception stand unchallenged, even when the cost carved deep. Family trust once shattered that thoroughly defies repair. Apologies arrive too late to rebuild what greed destroyed. Evil, quiet, selfish evil thrives only when decent people choose silence to preserve comfort. Speaking truth hurt everyone involved, me included. Yet living with complicity would have hurt worse, corroding from inside. Some viewers might call it cold, cutting ties permanently. Others understand boundaries as self-preservation. For me, wholeness meant removing what tried to hollow me out. Grandma's gift both times represented more than money. First attempt stolen, second delivered intact. It bought walls and a roof. Yes, more importantly, it affirmed that integrity has value, no theft can touch. That's the real inheritance, choosing truth regardless of fallout. Because when good people stay quiet, wrongdoing wins without resistance. I won't give it that luxury again.